So, guys, my name is Byron, and I participated in the 48-hour film project, in 2014 all the way until like 2022. And I do want to say it's been an up and down experience with me, but I do want to talk about, definitely an issue that I dealt with was racism in the competition, and also just the fact that I decided to file a Better Business Bureau report against the 48-hour film project for some issues that have happened. And to give some context is that I participated in one city and I experienced some racism. I actually had people say to me, you know what, first I went to a meet and greet event and people were saying things like, it's great that a black man's doing the competition. They're pointing their fingers. And some other people walking up to me and saying, hey, why don't you want to work on my team? Is that blacks work with blacks and other things like that? And then when I made a film for that competition that year, it wasn't that well made, but I remember when they read out the nominations at one of the award shows, they said whatever film Biden created. And the city producer was also saying things at their event, like, I pull favors with Mark Rupert, the president competition. We're going to have an edge to get to the Cannes Film Festival and do other things like that. So, after she disrespected me, another thing that happened was somebody won an award and they were on screen for less than 10 seconds and they won over my child actress who's on screen for many minutes. And she read off the nominations and said whatever film Byron created. And then the other thing that happened was the parents of the winners talked to me and said, like, you know what, I don't get why you didn't win, because I didn't get why you didn't win because, there's no reason why my daughter should have won for being on screen less than 10 seconds. And I learned the hard way that it was kind of a ruse because what they wanted me to do was get mad and say, and mouth off really, which I did. I said, it's unfair. It's picking friends. And I remember the city producer looking at me with scowling eyes. And then a few days later, she sent me an email criticizing my film and ended with, I'm just saying. So I reported that to Mark Rupert and, like he usually does, that he doesn't respond to a lot of these problems. And I think that that's a concurrent thing I'll say about Mark is, something has to be very, very dire before he actually responds to an issue. And that is not a good thing because I think a good boss, a good president, a good, a good person, a good leader will always say, hey, you know what, this is a problem. We need to talk about this and we need to make a decision that's appropriate for both people. And it was very clear that I was dealing with racism and I was dealing with harassment and I was dealing with instigation, and that's not what this competition's about. It's supposed to be encouraging people to come together and make movies. It should not be, a city producer just being a smart ass and all that stuff. And then the following year, I was going through a very hard time in my life, so I shared to an audience at her event that I struggled with suicidal thoughts and depression because I worked that job, survived an armed robbery, and the police were aiming guns at me. They were laughing while they're aiming guns at me. And I also remember how my manager, Andre, he was laughing his ass off when I almost got shot by the police, really. And I remember sharing that with the audience, but I remember this city producer again, she was snickering, she was chuckling, and she was making sarcastic gasping sounds because she saw me as maybe a special needs person sharing too much about myself. And then the other part of it was that when I mentioned that I struggled with suicidal thoughts, that was when she kind of gasped and looked shooken up really, because I really think that maybe in her sick psychology, I'm sorry to say it like that, she was like, okay, now I look like a victim. Now I look like a victim because of what I've been through. And it kind of is clear that to the audience, hey, this guy may have some mental health issues and look at how poorly he's treated. He's almost like Charlie Gordon in Flowers for Algernon, if you remember that film. It came out in the 60s, I believe, where it's about a mentally ill character. A character had mental retardation and he kept being treated like he was stupid, really. And also on top of that, a person struggled with PTSD and suicidal thoughts. And a very common issue at that time in the mid-2000s was a lot of black people were being shot by the police, really. It was, shoot first, ask questions later. So it was kind of bad in a way, really. And that really bothered me for many years because I think on one side, I did not know who was accountable. I said, hey, because she sent me some nasty emails. Because before I registered for the competition that year, she sent me an email saying, you know what, Byron, I know you're trying to do all the 4-year film projects that you can, because I did 16 the year I have the record. And she's just saying things. I hope you learn winning isn't everything. I hope you don't go to Mark Rupert and say that you should have won the whole competition. I hope you appreciate my hard work. And then she also accused me of cheating because I asked her questions about special effects. Like, always this really snippy attitude. And again, it was intentional, like learning from what she did last year, which was instigate me. And I also remember when she was the audience, she was kind of like making kind of like snickering faces, and she had like a smug smile, like she kind of was betting on me messing up things for herself. And she was kind of looking at her friends and snickering and puckering her mouth and whatever. And as I said, when I talked about suicide, and when I talk about how I'd tell my therapist I would struggle with thoughts about disembowelment or cutting my hand off or dismemberment, and people were starting to walk out and stuff like that. That was when she acted shell shocked for 2 reasons, because it made me look like a victim and made me say, hey, this is some real PTSD, really. And then the other part of it is that now she went from having a film, having won the winners the prior year to the Cannes Film Festival, to now the competition looks like it attracts, really, really fucked up people, really. But that's why we have to be nice to people, because sometimes you don't know the immaturity you bring out other people. And I really thought, and it was bad during that time, really, because, during that time I was struggling with suicidal thoughts, really. What would have happened if I said, you know what, I want to just hurt myself or take my own life in front of the whole audience, really. Like, imagine if I was that unstable, or imagine if there was another filmmaker that was unstable, or you watched the film Joker. Imagine if there was somebody really unstable and they said, hey, you know what, you get what you fucking deserve. And we saw what happened in that film. Like, I don't wish violence upon anybody, but yeah, it was a bad situation, really. So I struggled many years after that, because I said, hey, who's at fault, really? Am I at fault because of how I reacted? Or is she at fault because she instigated me? But I had to learn the hard way, no matter what, I'm at fault for making the immature decision to overreact, really. Yes, it's not right for other people to instigate us, but at the end of the day, we live in a world with a lot of mean people. And with a lot of mean people, and that's that, really. What happened was, a couple of years after that, I was kind of going back and forth a little bit. I think I was trying to apologize to her many times, and I was talking to many other city producers about saying, hey, I want to do your competition. I had bad experience. I've talked to some people about what happened, really. So in 2022, Mark Rupert just stepped in, really, like 6 years after this event, and he actually said, I apologize. This is not the experience that we want, but you said some really hurtful things about our city producer and our competition. I could ban you, but I'm putting you on a probationary period, meaning that the city that you have an issue with, I'm going to use Burlington, Vermont, to keep it anonymous. But it's not Burlington, Vermont, but I'm going to use Burlington. But you said, like, you can't do any other place. You can't do Burlington. You're banned from Burlington until further notice. But you can do whatever other city that you want. And when you do those other cities, those city producers have to write me an email about your behavior, and if you are somebody that that's appropriate for our community. And then there were two things about it that I really felt like there was no really serious analysis and depth and understanding of what I've been through. I really felt like, the city producer that I had an issue with, it became an issue when she just said, I don't want any more emails from Byron. I want him to shut the fuck up and just really get out of my life, really. So the city producer, she emailed me back and she said something like, you know what, nobody at that event was laughing at you, which she was. The other thing that she said was that I pray to God that you learn that a done issue is a done issue. And and I don't respond to you, or I don't like reach out to you because you misconstrue everything that I said, really. And ultimately it was, like I've said many, many times, it was ultimately, that's not the case, really. And there was really no hearing my side. So what I did to Mark, and I said, like, here's a video that I have on the internet about me talking about my experience. So I talked about the things that happened, like how I was bullied, how I dealt with racism, the event, her behavior, how I had PTSD, how at that time when the store got robbed, when I spoke on stage, my dad was running for governor of Connecticut. He said some inaccurate things about my mental health issues on statewide television. And that made me really angry, really. But I think that what Mark saw from it is he really just said, you know what, your behavior is inappropriate, and that's what I'm sticking with. And I do understand there's something to say. What she did was, there's one good thing about it, which was that I had to learn the hard way. It doesn't matter what you go through. It doesn't matter what you go through. You got to be mature and appropriate. And then also, when you have issues with people who are disrespectful and mean, you have to leave the situation. You have to advocate for yourself. You have to talk about what happened in appropriate ways, really. Like this video, this is like a second draft because my first video was very inappropriate. But I respect that. But one thing I will not respect that is that he really just glossed over a lot of the issues. There was really no sense of dissecting this city producer's bad behavior. And then many times I've heard stories about the city producer, about like her breaking the rules. People have other complaints about her, but Mark does nothing, really. And one of the reasons why he does nothing is because this city producer makes a lot of money, really. So he only cares about the money. He only cares about his friends, really. He doesn't really care about saying, okay, cut the shit, really. It doesn't matter. Nobody is above the 48-hour film project, and that's bad leadership. Because, like, I work at a hospital. I've been there for over 5 years, so, and I'm considered one of the best employees. I do a lot of really great stuff, really. But if I was giving a new guy a hard time, or if there was a new nurse and they were kind of being annoying, and then I kind of responded inappropriately, I'd be gone. I wouldn't be, they wouldn't say, you do so much work, we're going to keep you. We're going to get rid of you if you're not professional, or if you're bothering other people. But that's not how it works with the 48. And so the other thing that happened, unfortunately, was when they put me on probationary period, I said, hey, and I'll say it again, I was banned from Burlington, but I was allowed to do other cities. So what I did was I told the city producer, hey, you know what, I'm trying to do some redemption. I'm trying to build myself up. I'm actually volunteering for other events. And I said that I'm volunteering for the Providence, Rhode Island event. And I told them that I took pictures at their film showing, and then I'm going to take pictures at their award show tonight. And so what happened was that the city producer I had an issue with, she emailed the Rhode Island city producer saying that I was banned from the whole competition. No, I was not. I was not banned from the whole competition. I was just banned from the Burlington one, the city that I had an issue with. So what happened was that the Rhode Island city producer, she actually sent me an email back saying, Byron, if you show up to my competition, I will call the cops on you. So like I've said many, many times, like imagine if I was taking pictures of people at the award show, I was doing a really great job, she's proud of me, then she sees the email, like hypothetically imagine if she saw the email late, really. So imagine if she got scared, she called the cops, really, and then in front of like all the people in Providence, Rhode Island, you see a black man, send the nigger to jail, 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 send the nigger to jail. That's what we do. And then imagine if that was reported as a false arrest, really. Okay, well, this city producer was given wrong information. She had to react, really, and the reaction is that she decided to call the cops on me. Like in that hypothetical, imagine how bad the competition would look because of that. Imagine how bad imagine how bad Rhode Island would look if not only you arrested a black man, I'm mixed race, but people consider me black, but imagine if you arrested a black man, it's a false arrest, and then it's the same situation of a white lady getting mad and saying, I'm going to use police power, I'm going to get you in legal trouble over a lie, really. It's like To Kill a Mockingbird. It's like whatever, really. So, again, when I explained this to Mark, he said, this is a misunderstanding. There's a miscommunication here. No, it's that your city producer took your words. Either he did two things either happened. Either a city producer took your words and said, I don't like the consequences you gave Byron, so therefore I'm going to do my own thing. Or another thing that could have happened was that he was trying to be Mr. Nice Guy and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to do this. He either said to her, I'm going to do this, but then he lied to her and say, Byron, I'm going to do that, really, and I don't think you're going to find out about it. But either way, it was not good in many ways, obviously too. And I had to learn, ding dong, dumb dick, ding dong, dumb Byron. This city producer had issue with. She does not see me as a good guy, really. She just sees me as somebody who just talks too much, somebody who emails too much, So she just really wanted to say, I'm done with this. And part of it is also, and I know it's not professional, but some of it is narcissism. When you hurt people, when you screw people over, sometimes what you do has long-lasting damage. And sometimes people are not always going to see you in a good light, or some people are going to say, hey, you know what? Even though this is a past issue, this shit is so fucking serious. It just doesn't go away. It just doesn't go away. You burn down somebody's house, really. And then you're going to move into the neighborhood, the person's house you burned down, and this, analogy that I have, really, they're not going to sit around and say, hey, you know what, you're a good guy. They're going to say, hey, everybody watch out for this piece of shit. So that's what they did. The thing was, everything I've said, that I think it was right. But ultimately, and then the last part of it is that 2 years ago, the city producer stepped down. She was on statewide television for racism and discrimination, other shit like that. So what happened was I got taken off the probationary period. I didn't know why she stepped down. Then I just typed in her name on the internet because I was like saying, that's kind of weird. She really is devoted to this competition. Why she's stepping down? Then I saw all that. And then what happened was that a year after she stepped down because of discrimination, racism, and other things that she did on television that were brought to public television, Mark Rupert decides to go out of his way to Burlington. Remember what I said, that this is not Burlington. I'm using it as a hypothetical to protect the anonymity. He goes out of his way to that city producer city, gives her a Lifetime Achievement Award, and there's a split there. On one side, if he knew, that's horrible because that makes him look like a two-faced son of a bitch and a racist, ultimately. Saying, okay, I'm going to reward my fellow racist. It makes him look two-faced, makes him look like a son of a bitch, it makes him look like a sneaky son of a bitch, and makes it say, like, I care more about my friends than actually having a sense of ethics, really. If he knew. If he did not know, then I feel sorry for him because, it shows how manipulative, conniving, underhanded this city producer is. Because she's easily manipulating him, and easily he's doing one of two things. He's like saying, okay, even though you're doing all this shit to me, I'm not going to take a stand. I'm going to do whatever the hell I want. I'm not going to take a stand, really. It's a done issue. We have somebody else, really. We're going to move on, really. No. It reflects very poorly of him. And one thing I've told Mark about this is that, and then the last part of it is the Better Business Bureau report. So I filed a Better Business Bureau report against the 48, talked about everything that I've been through. And then Mark said, I want you to withdraw your complaint, really. I want you to take it back. And I sent him some emails about why I did it, but one of the things I said is that imagine when I spoke on stage and I talked about suicide and depression and PTSD and how my therapist and I would joke about how I would want to do dismemberment and disembowelment. Imagine if you decided to give me a Lifetime Achievement Award or most inspirational, like I'm a filmmaker taking a horrible thing that happened to me, I'm trying to make a story about it, or my goal is to ultimately make a film about it in the 4-hour film product. Imagine if you gave me most inspirational or the African American of the Year award. How do you think people in that and in that city. How do you think people in my home city would react if he did that? After I've said to people enough, after I caused people to cry, really, after I caused people to yell and scream at me to shut up, after I caused like this chaos, it could have easily turned into a freaking riot, causing people to scream every 2 seconds when I was saying something more and more and just disturbing, really. That would have not been the appropriate thing to do. The same way it's not appropriate that you give a Lifetime Achievement Award to somebody who's on fucking statewide television for being a racist. Again, if he knew, that's a horrible thing, and sorry, he's an asshole for that. He's a sneaky son of a bitch and an asshole if he knew, because that reflects so horribly on their mission of being anti-racist and bring people in. Really, that is such a backstab to every participant. If he did not know, I mean, if he knew, it reflects horribly on him. It reflects horribly on his character. And it reflects on on what a hypocrite and a snake that he is. If he knew, if he did not know, and I think there's a high probability of he did not know. If he did not know, it's still a bad look, but it ultimately says, it's also a little bit of my fault if he did not know as well, really, because I could have said, hey, Mark, I found this information about Patricia. Patricia or Steve or Clarissa or whatever her name is. I'm trying to make up a bunch of anonymous names. Hey, this is what your city producer did. And the reason why I'm telling you is because if you had a city producer that was a sex offender, if you had a city producer that got arrested for a DUI, if you had a city producer that was on the Epstein files or whatever, you would want to know, because that reflects on you. Like they say in with sexual harassment. And with sexual harassment, even though it's an individual, because the individual is part of a company, it reflects on the company, really. And that's kind of why I did that. His decision to give this person a Lifetime Achievement Award, host an event, give this person a good send-off, it's a reflection. It's such a bad reflection. A great comparison is that I like AEW. They brought Mike Tyson in. So the mission of AEW was really to get rid of the clickiness, the bad ethics in professional wrestling, really. But Mike Tyson, convicted rapist, he was holding the TNT Championship and giving it to the winner. So why would you bring in Mike Tyson? Isn't that kind of hypocritical? The same way it's kind of hypocritical to award a racist. And I think another thing that makes me a little angry with Mark is wholeheartedly I see a lot of pictures of him online. And so whenever there's a team that wins that are blacks or Asians or Hispanics or diverse people, he's always in those pictures. It reminds me of that episode of South Park where you see Randy Marsh taking pictures with Token's family to say, hey, Integrity Farm includes diversity, really. We have people from diverse backgrounds. That just does not look good. That's racial shoehorning and whatever, really. And there's a lot of people like my friend J.V. Harvey, who's a black man, who has that mentality of like, you know what? There's a lot of times he's been invited to do the 40. There's been times people said, hey, you know what? You don't have to pay the entrance fee. They want to bring him in because he's a good black filmmaker. But like I said, good black filmmaker. So that way they can say, hey, you know what? We have diverse people in my home city. When a lot of times there's only white people there, really. Like to chase all the minorities out, really. But yeah, and then you look at how I'm treated and how that is and how they want two things to happen with me. They want me to just say it is what it is, come back, really, and really just eat and really just let it go, really. Just eat the shit sandwich, digest it, get out of your system, and flush the toilet, or they want me to just shut the fuck up, really, and ignore me and wait until I run out of steam, really. But either way, there's two things I gotta say. That first of all, I'm done with the $48 film project. It was nothing more than a traumatizing experience. And ultimately, if I go back, then I'm being a house nigger. Slap me in the face, and I come back, really. So I can't do that. And then the other part of it is I'm 38 years old. This has been a traumatizing experience that's been on my mind for many, many years, So, why should I kind of just, make peace? There's a lot of things I wanted to do. There's a lot of innovation and ideas that I've had, really. There's so many things that I wanted to achieve in this competition, but they made it an uncomfortable experience. And unfortunately, it came down to me being African American. Unfortunately, it came down to me having some mental health issues where people looked at me and said, oh, maybe he's autistic. Maybe he's a stupid boy. We're going to treat him whatever type of way, really. And I wasn't that good of a filmmaker. They saw me as a naive guy that wore my heart on my shoulders. Oh, well, see him as a money bag, really. Like, treat him like he's stupid, really. And then when it gets to a point where maybe I need to be pushed away because I'm not good of a filmmaker, why not? Fuck him over, really. So they really treat me like shit, really. They really treat me like a nigger. I feel like a nigger by doing that competition, really. And the BBB report is justified because, again, this happened between 2014 and 2022. We can all fucking agree, quite honestly, racism is unacceptable. But the fact that racism was at that competition and there's been no active, trying to understand, trying to make good peace with me, trying to make good understanding with me, going out and saying, I understand racism and other issues, because there's not been that level of understanding, the BBB report is justified, because I don't want the same type of film. I don't want another filmmaker to go what I've been through. And then the other thing is it protects the 40-hour film project, because what would happen, as I always said, what would happen if you got somebody unstable? What would happen if you got Arthur Fleck, the Joker, and he decided to go on stage and kill a city producer because they pushed him too hard, and there's many people who don't play. You make fun of somebody who has mental health issues, make fun of their struggles. You make fun of their struggles with racism and racial profiling and almost be murdered by police. There's a lot of times where it could end with somebody just saying, hey, you know what, I gotta respond by bringing a gun to the event and doing what I need to do, really. Again, I never had those thoughts. I never had any thoughts of hurting any producer, domestic terrorism, whatever, against the 40-hour film project. But I'm saying hypothetically, you don't want to mess with the wrong person. So to have this go out there, to have this be a consequence, is a way for Mark to understand that this does not go away. And the reason why it does not go away is because he's not shown the initiative or shown the growth or shown the understanding that this is unacceptable. A city producer is racially harassing somebody. A city producer's friends are racially harassing somebody. A city producer has a pattern of racism, discrimination at their job. You give them a Lifetime Achievement Award. They're on the news for very embarrassing things. Lifetime Achievement Award. You ignore them every single time, bring up racism and discrimination. You know what? If he was, and he's not shown any type of wanting to grow and do better from this. So ultimately, you know what? You mess with the wrong person. You mess with me, and that's what happens, really, because I was always taught to be, kind and forgiving and understanding, but the problem is I learned eventually that's not how we live life, because it teaches me to be a big old bitch, and I'm not going to be anybody's bitch anymore, really. You disrespect me, there are reasonable consequences.